What's going on, guys? I finally got this neck stable enough to recarve, and then I think I've got two tiny repairs that I need to make here yet, but I got the neck stable enough to recarve, which is what I'm going to start in the next video. But wanted to show you my process for getting this neck stabilized. I ran a piece of wood on each side, and then I reconnected the channel with a special 24-inch jig. I've got all of this stuff lining up pretty good so that when I recarve this and start sanding, I may only have to run one little piece of wood here to clean this up. Essentially, I'm doing the toothpick method of gluing in a bunch of pieces to make this strong again. A lot of you have been commenting on the other videos on why I didn't do this or that. If I had shaved off the veneer of the headstock and then the veneer of the serial number, I would have too thin of a piece of wood to glue back on. And really, the value of these guitars is the inlay and the serial number, and everyone has a Les Paul with a neck issue. So this is obviously the biggest neck issue and the biggest repair that I have done to date, but wanted to get into the video and show you how I did it. So what we did is we made some strips of ebony and a center strip of maple, and we're going to glue this piece first. This is the most critical piece of the repair. We want to have that ebony width the same width as the ebony in the neck, and then we want to match that up and glue it down. And the previous repair, I don't even know what they used, but they made a mess of it. So I've got like multiple repairs to do. So we made the strips, got them sanded perfectly on my drum sander, glued it up, and then we started sizing up the strip to make it fit. So one nice level edge, and we're actually going to glue the strip on top of the strip so we get some extra strength. I'll show you that in the video here. So as part of that, we needed to build a jig, a much larger jig, to carve the neck out. So we're doing a 24-inch radius. We built that sled with a new handle. This is very similar to a jig I've used for Les Paul neck repairs, but made it at such a bigger scale because I have so much more to route out. So we sanded the edges of the jig and the router rest, and played with it a bunch of times, make sure it's smooth. And I've got a pretty big bit, and we are just going to route out a huge chunk. And you can see what a huge mess this is. I should have hooked up a vacuum cleaner, but I wanted to see what I was doing. And so we do about 3 passes, and we lower it each time, and I take a huge amount of material off. Slightly terrifying, to be quite honest. So we flip it on its edge, and then that allows us to do the other side. We're going to lower it once more and take it below that volute there. But that's looking pretty solid. So we'll go ahead and speed up the video just a little bit. Lower it, one more pass, flip it over, another pass, and now we're pretty clean. Huge chunked out. So then what we're going to do is build the corresponding piece that goes right in. So we let that glue up, we sanded it, and then we're going to take a custom 24-inch. Actually, it's like 26.5 because you're adding the depth of the router to that jig. And I actually did a couple passes to get this right. I wanted it to be perfect. And since this is such a major repair, I didn't want any room for error. So we're going to build this jig to route out that channel at the same depth. Lots of jigs to get this to work correctly. Like I said, this is an incredibly complicated build. I'm going to run some screws through, hold this piece together. Did not want this to move or shoot off the router. Was really concerned about that. So I want to make sure that it's on there tight and that it's not moving. So we'll trim this on the bandsaw. Make sure it's really close. And we'll come back and slowly route this off. And if you notice something, guys, I don't have a full bit that's chunking this off. I have a little 1/4-inch bit and I'm raising it just a little bit each time. So that way this isn't going to shoot off and I'm not going to get any tear out. That is critical in this repair. Spent a lot of time already gluing and sizing this thing up that I don't want it to shoot. So there, we're looking pretty good. We'll swap out the router for one with a larger bit. And then we'll get ready to glue this in. We have to clean up the inside of that route just a little bit. The neck is really, really unstable at this point, so I am slightly terrified. It's moving a lot. So we're going to go with some Titebond wood glue. Make sure it's all over that. And then the most crucial piece here is getting those strips of ebony to line up. We'll clamp one side down, make sure it looks good. And then slowly clamp down the other side. And you can see that this doesn't go all the way into that channel. I'm still going to add one more strip on the backside for some additional strength. Again, the toothpick analogy. So we'll clamp this, let it sit. So then we're going to glue in a couple of inserts on each side. You can see the extra piece that I glued on for the volute. This is just adding some strength and filling out that large route. And you can see there's just a slight gap there. We're going to go back and run another piece of wood in there with another route. I didn't film that, but we did add one more strip in there to close that gap just slightly. That was at a different depth. So we got multi-laminates going on here. Once that's done, we start cleaning it up. So we're going to have to re-drill the channel for the truss rod, which is fine, but we've got a nice flat, clean surface to do some work. So you can see the ebony and the patch, and it matches up pretty good. So the stages of this were to sort of stabilize, repair the front with those wedges, and then sort of recut everything so that it goes back together straight and level. Multiple repairs to get this to be clean and somewhat original. Lots of sanding to get this flat. Alright, so that's the profile of my 2050. And we're just cleaning that up to cut it. I've got a little bit of room and I understand what the heck is happening. You can see that nice wedge that I glued in. So here then is the strip that is going to replace the edge that was all chipped out. So this is a 1/2-inch rabbet, and we're going to essentially add piece of wood on each side because we had so much tear out when the binding came off. So I've got a template on the bottom because I've got a slight overhang of the headstock overlay. And here we're just making sure it's nice and clean. And then we'll run that through on both sides. We then cut a piece of maple to extend through the whole neck. Again, this is that toothpick analogy. We sanded the edge so that it lines up perfectly. And we're going to glue one side and then glue the other side as well. So actually what we did is we routed one side, glued it, and then we came back and routed the other side and glued the other one. So one side at a time. Make sure it's flat. Remember I said there was a bow in the neck? Well, now that's gone. So I've cleaned that up by doing this method. You can see the straight piece of wood going through. And this is really adding a ton of strength to a really weak point where that neck was stepped on. So here's the other side as well. Clamp it, glue it. And you can see I'm going to have to cut the tenon just slightly again. Got that overhang, but this is what makes it a really solid repair. Lots of clamps, get it nice and straight. It's funny, guys, you think you run out of clamps, and you always do. There's a block there, I got it to make sure that it's flat. And then before you go to a pool party, you got to do a little luthier work, huh? So we're going to cut that tenon, and then we're going to file it so it's flat. So that Veritas crosscut saw is probably the best saw I have in my shop. And then we pull out a file and file it down so that that edge is clean. And then this is a template we were making to then re-clean up the edge of the overhang of the new wood that we just put on. So that new wood is of much wider. So I made a special template, fretboard template essentially, to then cut each side of the excess waste off, and then we got to reroute it. So we clamp that down, double stick tape, let it sit for a while, and then we're going to trim it. Cut as close to that line as you can without nicking it. Both sides. And then we're going to come back with a router and get it flush. So now the neck is really in pretty decent shape. It's totally stable, ready to be recarved. And then I may only have a small repair on two sections that may need a little bit more wood. So we'll see once we do the carve. Alright, so the next video we are going to start carving this, and then we are going to finalize this up and get it going. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.